All right, so first book review here on the Catacombs, and the one I'm going to be reviewing today is Reentry. So this is by Eric Berger. It's the second book that he's written about SpaceX, sort of a companion book to the first one, which is called Liftoff. So if you're interested in space and you're interested in this book, I would definitely recommend reading Liftoff as well. They certainly go together. But the difference between the books is it's one main theme, right? So Liftoff is really just when SpaceX is trying to figure out if it can even be a company, right? I mean, it's true startup mode, which interestingly enough, in some ways this book is as well. But what I mean is that at Liftoff, they don't even know if they're going to be able to pay the bills. They have very little money. They're super scrappy. I mean, it's a crazy story on what they're doing to try to create reusable rockets, get stuff into space. Reentry kind of picks up further along the journey. I think SpaceX is a 20-year-old company by now. This is sort of the second half of that. It's like the 2010 to 2020-ish era. So it's established as a company, but they're still trying to figure out if they can make money, if they can be profitable. What exactly are they going to sell? And so really that's the story of this book, right? It's about the company, Elon Musk, the culture, trying to get into space. And it's an absolutely incredible story. I mean, if you're interested in space travel, how we're going to become interplanetary, things like that, I would certainly recommend reading this book. Eric has pretty cool access, the author has pretty cool access to a lot of the employees. One thing that Elon has always been pretty open to is giving access. He himself gives the author access, although admittedly in this book, he says he did not have as much access to Elon as he did in the previous one. But at the same time, it's very open and honest. He talks there's no secrets. And so, certainly recommend it. Anyways, that's what the book is about. My thoughts on it. So I wrote down a few things. So kind of first things first is just the SpaceX as a company, the culture. I personally find that to be very inspiring. And I think in particular, if you are someone who is young, trying to figure out what you want to do, right? I don't want this to seem like a find your passion thing, because I'm not really one who believes in that, but it is inspiring when you read a book like this and you see how bought in both past, current employees are about the mission. There's so many stories that come up in this book and the previous book about employees who would literally do anything for the business. And then the culture of the company, right? The reality is, and they talk about this all the time in the book, is that the expectations is that you work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And as someone who has not done something like that in a long time, it reminds me of a younger version of myself. And quite frankly, something that I wish I had done, right? I wish I had found a company like this, because I think we've all kind of been at that point in our lives where we were grinding away, kind of burning out on something that wasn't really that important. And when you're talking about going to space, becoming interplanetary, creating reusable rockets, I mean, this is an awesome culture to be a part of. And it's something that's very prevalent in this book, is how much people wanted to be a part of that mission. And they talk about it all the time. And in fact, to the point where most of the employees do burn out. It's not burnt out on the mission. It's just so much work. I mean, think about that, just the logistics of it. It's not really possible to have a good family life when you're working that much. And so these guys, they sort of do it for a period of time, and then it becomes enough for most of them. There are some that have been there a long time, but most, it's an incredible mission to be a part of, and it's inspiring. And I think if you're someone who's young, especially today here in 2026 is recording, reading books like this are inspiring. It's not to say that you should join SpaceX, but it's just to say, like, there are still companies out there that you can be a part of a cool mission. Along those same lines, Elon's role, right? I am not someone who hates on Elon. As someone who's followed his journey from Tesla and into SpaceX, I've even invested in Tesla many years ago. I think there are just as many good things about the man as there are bad things, and he certainly does stupid things, particularly says stupid things. But as someone who is driving a company and pushing things forward, you read books like this and you just see how much he cares and how much the mission matters to him. There are so many different points in this book where people talk about how to manage Elon, and the one that always just comes through is you just can't BS the guy. You have to be straightforward with him. He accepts straightforward, honest answers, and I think it's again kind of inspiring for me. There are so many companies where the CEOs, the leaders of the companies are afraid to make decisions, afraid to drive things forward because they don't want to be held accountable, and Elon is literally the opposite. He is, make a decision, let's go with it, we'll deal with the consequences. And I think in corporate America that is lost in a lot of ways today. And just having that sort of one single point of failure really helps, because you can just move fast. And I like that. It's inspiring. I think a lot of us would benefit more if we worked for companies and bosses that were acting like that. So I know certainly there are some things that he does and says that are controversial, but I think he is absolutely a net positive. And if you read a lot of books about him, whether it's the biography, books like this, I've read the Ashley Vance book, the Walter Isaacson book, these two books, there's a lot of good things about the man. Kind of rounding it up here, two final thoughts from me is, so the future, I am certainly someone who, when I think about where we are at in 2026 in the world, literally right now we've got a war in Iran. I'm not super optimistic about the next, call it 50 years. And I do think that if we don't get interplanetary, where we can start, whether it's having data centers in space, which is kind of the thing that's in vogue right now, or just building in space, right? Living on Mars, having stuff on the moon, other planets, just having space stations, right? Like, I just think that that's like required for the future of humanity. And it is companies like SpaceX that are going to be at the forefront of that. And so really, I think everyone should have at least some level of interest in that aspect of it. And then, the last thought that I have on this, and something that I think is honestly kind of cool. I am not someone who's trusts the government very much. I don't like that the government gets involved in a lot of things, but I will say there was a time not too long ago where the government had healthy relationships with companies, whether it was technology companies, the gas and oil industry, whatever that is, it was a healthy relationship. And I do think that that's important. I think that the government should be supportive of companies that are driving things forward. I don't think that there should be an adversarial relationship between government and important companies. And one thing that I've always found interesting about the space industry is that the government has a pretty good relationship. There are companies like Boeing in particular that tried desperately to hold the SpaceXs of the world back, and they will continue to do so, right? Because they're legacy companies that don't want things to be pushed forward. They want things to stay as they are. But the government and NASA, yes, there were ups and downs, but as you read in this book, pretty good relationship. And I like hearing that. I think that that's important. That also is inspiring to know that the government is sort of doing the right thing and supporting companies like this. And there are others out there, right? You think about like ASTS, Rocket Lab, there are others coming. And I think that we want our government supporting the companies, even if they are not the legacy companies. You want them, you want the SpaceXs of the world driving things forward. So anyway, great book for me. I certainly would recommend reading it. As far as my rating goes, I would give it probably about a 7.5 out of 10. Not the best book in the world. You do have to have a bit of a niche in terms of interest. It's really a play-by-play. I wish it was more chronological. It does jump back and forth. I wish it just told a chronological story of 2010 to 2019 or whatever that may be. But still, it's a good book. So anyway, I certainly recommend people reading it.